December 26, 1944. Lubang Island, Philippines. The air on Lubang Island smelled of rotting vegetation and salt. It was a thick, humid scent that stuck to the back of the throat. Second Lieutenant Hiro Onoda stood at attention, the sweat trickling down his spine under his woolen uniform. He was 22 years old. He had been trained at the Nakano School, the Imperial Army's secret intelligence center. They didn't teach you how to die for the Emperor at Nakano. They taught you how to stay alive so you could kill more enemies later. Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, his commanding officer, stood before him. The war was going badly. The Americans were coming. Everyone knew it, though no one said it aloud. The main Japanese force was pulling back, abandoning this small, strategic island to its fate. Taniguchi locked eyes with Onoda. He placed a hand on the young lieutenant's shoulder. "You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand," Taniguchi said. His voice was low, almost drowned out by the rustle of the palm trees. Onoda nodded. "Yes, sir. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens, we'll come back for you," Taniguchi continued. "Until then, so long as you have one soldier, you are to continue to lead him. You may have to live on coconuts. If that's the case, live on coconuts. Under no circumstances are you to give up your life voluntarily." "I understand, sir," Onoda said. He watched the major walk away toward the boat that would take him off the island. Onoda gripped his Arisaka Type 99 rifle. He felt a strange mixture of pride and dread. He was being left behind as a stay-behind agent. A ghost. He didn't know it then, but that order, forbidden to die, would become his prison for the next 30 years. February 1945. The collapse. The Americans didn't knock. They kicked the door down. When the U.S. forces landed on Lubang on February 28th, it wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. The Japanese garrison, poorly trained and terrified, shattered within days. Most died in banzai charges or ritual suicide. But not Onoda. He remembered the order. Guerrilla warfare. He took 3 men with him into the thick jungle interior. Corporal Shoichi Shimada, Private Kinshichi Kozuka, and Private Yuichi Akatsu. They vanished into the green hell of the mountains. August 1945. The first lie. The rains on Lubang were relentless. They turned the ground into sludge and made their uniforms rot off their bodies. 6 months had passed. They were living like animals, stealing cows from local farmers and drying the meat in the sun. They were constantly on the move, never sleeping in the same spot 2 nights in a row. One morning in October, while they were huddled under a banana leaf shelter, they found it. Piece of paper. It wasn't just paper. It was a leaflet dropped from an airplane. Onoda picked it up with dirty fingers. The ink was running slightly from the damp. The war ended on August 15th. "Come down from the mountains." Onoda read it. Shimada looked over his shoulder, his eyes wide with hope. "Is it true, Lieutenant?" Shimada whispered. "Is it over?" Onoda stared at the paper. He analyzed it with the cold logic of an intelligence officer. "Look at the wording," Onoda said, pointing to a phrase. "It says the war ended. It doesn't say we won. It implies we surrendered." "So?" Akatsu asked, his voice shaking. "Japan does not surrender," Onoda snapped. "The Imperial Army fights to the death. If we had lost, there would be no leaflets. The Americans would just come and kill us." He crumpled the paper and threw it into the mud. "It is a trick," Onoda declared. "Allied propaganda. They want us to come out so they can capture us. We ignore it." The 3 men looked at him. They were starving. They were covered in jungle sores. But Onoda was an officer. He was the embodiment of the Emperor's will. "Yes, sir," they murmured. And just like that, the war continued. 1949. The weak link. For years, they had been fighting a phantom war for 4 years. Their clothes were now patched-together rags made from stolen blankets. Their shoes were held together with vines. The psychological toll was heavier than the physical one. The silence of the jungle was maddening. Every snapping twig sounded like an American patrol. Private Akatsu was the youngest, and he was breaking. He had always been the softest of the group. He complained about the food. He cried at night. Onoda tried to toughen him up, sometimes striking him, sometimes encouraging him. "We are warriors," Onoda would hiss in the dark. "Hold it together." But Akatsu was done. One night in September 1949, during a heavy storm, Onoda woke up. The feeling of emptiness in the shelter was palpable. "Akatsu," he whispered. No answer. "Shimada, wake up!" Onoda kicked the corporal. "Where is Akatsu?" They searched the perimeter. The rain washed away any tracks. Akatsu was gone. "He deserted," Kozuka spat, checking the bolt of his rifle. "The coward ran away." Onoda felt a cold knot in his stomach. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a tactical disaster. Akatsu knew their hideouts. He knew their water sources. If he was captured by the enemy, the Filipino police or American troops, he would talk. "We have to move," Onoda ordered. "Now." "We go higher into the mountains." They packed their meager belongings, the rifle ammunition, the cooking pot, the map, and disappeared deeper into the bush. 1950. The voice from the sky. 6 months after Akatsu fled, the enemy changed tactics. Onoda, Shimada, and Kozuka were hiding near a ridge when they heard a voice. It wasn't a soldier screaming. It was a loudspeaker. "Onoda, Kozuka, Shimada." The voice echoed through the valley. It was distorted, but recognizable. It was Akatsu. "It is me, Akatsu," the voice boomed. "The war is over. I am eating rice and drinking water. The Filipino people are friendly. Come down." Shimada looked at Onoda. "That is Akatsu. He is alive." Onoda narrowed his eyes. He watched the trees, looking for the glint of a sniper scope. "They captured him," Onoda deduced. "They are torturing him. They are forcing him to read a script. Can't you hear the strain in his voice? He is reading what the Americans wrote for him. But he says the war is over." "If the war was over," Onoda said with absolute conviction, "Major Taniguchi would be here. He gave me an order. I will come back for you." "Has Taniguchi come back?" "No, sir." "Then the war is not over." Onoda raised his rifle. He aimed it in the direction of the loudspeaker. "Akatsu is a traitor," Onoda said. "He has joined the enemy deception corps. If we see him, we shoot him." They retreated further, into the most inhospitable parts of the island, where the rats were big and the vipers were deadly. They became ghosts. They stopped lighting fires during the day. They communicated with hand signals. They declared their own private war on the island of Lubang. They burned farmers' crops to punish the enemy for not surrendering. They shot cows to survive. They fired warning shots at fishermen. To the people of Lubang, they were mountain devils. To Onoda, he was the last line of defense for the Japanese Empire. 1952. The family letters. The search parties kept coming. But now they brought new weapons. Not guns, but memories. One afternoon, a plane flew low over the jungle. Thousands of photos fluttered down like snow. Onoda picked one up. It was a picture of his family. His brother. His mother. They were standing in front of their house in Japan. The house looked older, but it was there. On the back, in his brother's handwriting, "Hiro, please come home. The war is over. We are waiting for you." Onoda's hands trembled. He stared at the face of his mother. He felt a lump in his throat so painful he couldn't swallow. Shimada and Kozuka were holding photos of their own families. Shimada was weeping silently. "They went to so much trouble," Kozuka whispered, "to get our families to write these." Onoda looked at the photo. He looked at the shadows. He looked at the grain of the image. "It is a clever forgery," Onoda said. His voice was hollow but firm. "Sir, look at the architecture," Onoda pointed. "That house. The roof tiles are slightly different. And my brother," his eyes looked dead. "They probably retouched an old photo." "But why?" Shimada asked. "Why would they do this?" "Because we are hurting them," Onoda said, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. "Because we are effective. The Americans are desperate. They know they can't catch us, so they try to break our spirits with these fake sentimentalities. He took the photo of his mother. He wanted to keep it. He wanted to press it to his chest. Instead, he took out his lighter. We cannot let them weaken us, Onoda said. He lit the corner of the photo. He watched his mother's face turn to ash and drift away on the wind. We stay, Onoda commanded. We fight. The three men tightened the straps of their packs. They turned their backs on the photos scattered in the mud and walked back into the darkness of the jungle. The war was going to last forever. May 1954. Gontan Beach. The jungle has a way of digesting things. It eats metal, it eats cloth, and it eats men. Corporal Shoichi Shimada was slowing down. At 40 years old, the malnutrition was gnawing at his joints. His legs were swollen, heavy with edema. He wasn't the sharp soldier he had been in 1945. He was a tired, gloomy shadow. Onoda noticed it. In the guerrilla war, a slow man is a dead man. But Shimada was his brother in arms. They had shared the same mosquito net for 9 years. We need fresh supplies, Onoda decided. We go to the beach at Gontan. The fishermen sometimes leave salt. It was a risk. The beach was open ground. But they were desperate for salt to preserve their meat. They moved at dawn. Onoda took point. Kozuka took the rear. Shimada limped in the middle. They reached the tree line. The beach was white and blindingly bright. They spotted a fishing boat pulled up on the sand. Cover me, Onoda signaled. He moved forward. But the jungle has eyes. A shot rang out. Not the crack of a hunting rifle, but the heavy thud of a military carbine. Philippine constabulary. Patrol had been waiting. Ambush! Onoda screamed. Pull back! He fired a burst from his Arasaka to suppress the enemy. Kozuka was already moving, laying down cover fire. But Shimada froze. He tried to run, but his bad leg gave way. Bang! A bullet caught Shimada in the forehead. He didn't scream. He just dropped like a puppet with cut strings, his face hitting the hot sand. Onoda stopped. He looked at Shimada's body. The training at Nakano School screamed, "Leave the dead. Save the intelligence." But the human part of him screamed, "Brother." "Lieutenant!" Kozuka yelled from the trees. "They are flanking." Onoda looked at Shimada one last time. He saw the blood soaking into the white sand. There was nothing to be done. Onoda turned and ran. He sprinted into the green wall of the jungle, bullets snapping the leaves around his head. That night, deep in the mountains, there were no words. Onoda and Kozuka sat in the dark. They were now a binary star system. 2 men against the world. He died well, Onoda said finally. It was a lie. Shimada had died scared and tired. But it was a necessary lie. We will avenge him, Kozuka said. He was sharpening his bayonet. The sound was rhythmic, hypnotic. SHHHK. SHHHK. 1959 to 1969. The Demon Brothers. Time ceased to be linear. It became a loop of rain, hunger, and cleaning rifles. For the next 10 years, Onoda and Kozuka became a myth. The locals called them the Mountain Demons. They were ghosts who stole cows, burned rice fields, and vanished before the police could arrive. They stopped talking. They didn't need to. They knew each other's thoughts. A twitch of a finger meant enemy. A glance at the sky meant storm. They maintained strict military discipline. They woke up at dawn. They saluted the rising sun and the emperor. They inspected each other's gear. They patched their uniforms using needles made from wire and thread made from unraveled hemp. Their clothes were a patchwork quilt of survival. But they were getting older. Their teeth were rotting. Their skin was leathery. And the enemy was playing mind games. Newspapers were left on trails. Japanese newspapers. They showed Tokyo with skyscrapers, bullet trains, television sets. Onoda picked one up in 1965. He looked at a picture of the Tokyo Olympics. "Look at this," Onoda sneered. "They are good at special effects. They built a fake city to trick us." Kozuka nodded. "They must be desperate if they are spending this much money on props. The war must be intensifying," Onoda deduced. If Japan was really this rich, they would have sent the fleet to pick us up. The fact that no fleet has come means the Imperial Navy is still fighting a blockade. It was a closed loop of logic. Every piece of evidence that the war was over was interpreted as proof that the war was still on. It was madness, constructed with the bricks of military discipline. October 19, 1972. The Last Patrol. 18 years after Shimada died. 27 years since the surrender. Onoda was 50. Kozuka was 51. They were old men playing a young man's game. The villagers are harvesting the rice near Salak, Kozuka said. We should burn it. Deny the enemy supplies. Agreed, Onoda said. We strike at dusk. It was a routine mission. They had done it 100 times. They crept down to the rice paddies. The villagers fled screaming when they saw the two ragged figures emerging from the mist. Onoda began to set fire to the rice stacks. The smoke was thick and acrid. Hurry, Onoda ordered. The police will come. Kozuka was lighting a stack further down the field. He was smiling. He enjoyed the sabotage. It made him feel like a soldier, not a castaway. Lieutenant, Kozuka yelled. The fire is catching well. Then a sound. A dry pop. It sounded like a bamboo stalk bursting in the fire. But Kozuka stumbled. He clutched his chest. Shoulder wound. Kozuka groaned. He tried to raise his rifle. Onoda spun around. He saw the police patrol on the ridge. They weren't using carbines this time. They were using M16s. Get down, Kozuka! Onoda screamed. Onoda fired 2 rounds at the police to keep their heads down. He ran toward Kozuka to drag him to cover. Kozuka looked at Onoda. His eyes were wide, surprised. He opened his mouth to say something, perhaps to apologize for getting hit. Bang! A second bullet hit Kozuka in the chest, pierced his heart. He fell backward into the burning rice. Onoda reached him. He grabbed Kozuka's shirt. Kinshichi, move! Kozuka didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the smoke-filled sky. He was gone. Onoda roared, a sound of pure, animal rage. He fired the rest of his magazine at the ridge, forcing the police to duck. Then he made the calculation. He couldn't carry the body. He couldn't save him. Onoda grabbed Kozuka's rifle. He grabbed his ammunition pouch. Forgive me, Onoda whispered. He turned and ran. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs cramped, until he was deep in the sanctuary of the thorns. The solitude. That night was the longest of Onoda's life. He sat under a rock overhang. The rain was pouring down. He was alone. For 27 years, he had a subordinate. He had a friend. He had someone to validate his reality. When he said, "The war is still on," Kozuka said, "Yes, sir." Now there was only the silence. "Kozuka is dead," Onoda said aloud. The voice sounded strange in the damp air. He cleaned Kozuka's rifle. He counted the rounds. Good. More ammo for the mission. He didn't cry. He couldn't afford to cry. If he cracked now, Kozuka's death would be meaningless. I will hold, Onoda promised the darkness. I will hold until the major comes. 1974. The Explorer. Kozuka's death made headlines. Japanese soldier killed in Philippines. Japan was shocked. They thought the stragglers were a myth. But Kozuka's body was real. And if Kozuka was there, Onoda might still be alive. Search parties were sent. Helicopters with loudspeakers blasted Onoda's brother's voice. They dropped magazines. They dropped letters. Onoda watched them from his spider holes. He aimed his rifle at the helicopters. Enemy psyops, he thought. They are getting louder. Then came the boy. Norio Suzuki was a college dropout. A hippie. A wanderer. He had told his friends he was leaving Japan to find Lieutenant Onoda, a panda, and the abominable snowman in that order. He didn't bring a gun. He brought cigarettes and a tent. February 20th, 1974. Onoda was stalking a strange scent. Someone was camping in his jungle. He crept up on the tent. He saw a young man sitting by a fire, reading a comic book. Onoda lunged. He jumped into the clearing, his rifle leveled at the boy's chest. "Hands up!" Onoda screamed. Suzuki didn't panic. He looked at the wild man with the rusted rifle. A man wearing a rotting imperial uniform, eyes burning with madness and discipline. Suzuki slowly raised his hands. He smiled. "Lieutenant Onoda?" Suzuki asked. Onoda froze. "How do you know my name?" "I've been looking for you," Suzuki said calmly. "The Emperor is worried about you." Onoda lowered the rifle slightly. "The Emperor?" "Yes," Suzuki said. "Sir, the war is over. Really over. Japan is rich. We have cars. We have peace. Please, won't you come home?" Onoda looked at the boy. He wanted to believe him. God, he wanted to go home. He wanted to sleep in a bed. He wanted to eat miso soup. But the iron programming of the Nakano school held firm. Onoda shook his head. He jacked around into the chamber. "I am a soldier," Onoda said, his voice cracking. "I have my orders. Major Taniguchi said he would come back for me. Until my commanding officer relieves me of duty, I do not surrender." "Major Taniguchi?" Suzuki asked. "If I bring him here, if I bring him to you, will you quit?" Onoda paused. He lowered the rifle. "If the major orders it," Onoda whispered, "then I will lay down my arms." "Okay," Suzuki said. "I'll go get him." Onoda backed away into the jungle. He didn't trust the boy. But for the first time in 30 years, a tiny, dangerous spark had been lit in his chest. Hope. March 9th, 1974. Wakayama Point, Lubang Island. The moon was full, casting long, silver shadows across the clearing. The jungle was noisy tonight. Cicadas, night birds, the rustle of lizards in the dry leaves. Hiro Onoda sat in the brush, invisible. He had been there for 2 days. He was watching the tent. Norio Suzuki, the hippie boy, had returned. He had kept his promise. But was it a trap? Onoda scanned the perimeter. No police. No American GIs. Just the boy and another man. The other man was older. He walked with a slight stoop. He was wearing an old, ill-fitting Imperial Army uniform. It looked like a costume, baggy and moth-eaten. Onoda narrowed his eyes. He focused his night vision. The walk. He knew that walk. It was the walk of a man who had commanded a battalion. It was Major Yoshimi Taniguchi. But he looked so old. The last time Onoda saw him, Taniguchi was a warrior in his prime. Now he was a bookseller from Kyushu, dragged out of retirement by a college student to end a ghost war. Onoda's heart began to hammer against his ribs. It was a terrifying feeling. For 30 years, he had prayed for this moment. Now that it was here, he was afraid. If the major was here, it meant the order was coming. And if the order came, the war ended. And if the war ended, what was Onoda? He checked his rifle. The Arisaka Type 99 was pristine. He had cleaned it 500 times a year. He had 500 rounds of ammunition left, preserved in coconut oil and jars. He stood up. He adjusted his pack. He straightened his cap. He stepped out of the jungle. The order. Suzuki saw him first. The boy gasped and pointed. Major Taniguchi turned. He saw the apparition emerging from the darkness. Onoda looked like a demon from a folklore tale. His uniform was a patchwork of rags, stitched together with wire. His sword hung at his hip. His eyes were wild, intense, and burning with a terrifying discipline. Onoda stopped 10 paces away. He snapped his heels together. The sound was sharp in the silence. He saluted. The perfect, rigid salute of 1944. Second Lieutenant Hiro Onoda reporting. "Sir?" Onoda shouted. His voice cracked with emotion. "I await your orders." Taniguchi stared at him. The major's lip trembled. He saw the ghost of the young man he had left behind 3 decades ago. He saw the waste. He saw the tragedy. Taniguchi straightened up. He assumed the role of the commanding officer one last time. He unfolded a piece of yellowing paper. It was the imperial rescript on the termination of the war. Dated August 15, 1945. "Lieutenant Onoda," Taniguchi said, his voice shaking slightly. "I shall read the order." Onoda stood like a statue. He didn't breathe. "Command to Special Squad, Lubang Detachment." Taniguchi read. 1. In accordance with the Imperial Command, the 14th Area Army has ceased all combat activity. 2. The military duties of the Special Squad in charge of guerrilla warfare are formally relieved. 3. All units and individuals under the command of Special Squad are to cease military operations immediately and place themselves under the command of the nearest superior officer. Taniguchi lowered the paper. The jungle went silent. Onoda stood there. The words hit him like bullets. Ceased. Relieved. Immediately. He blinked. He looked at Taniguchi. He looked at the rifle in his hands. "Sir," Onoda whispered. "Does this mean we lost?" Taniguchi nodded slowly. "We lost, Onoda. Japan surrendered 29 years ago." Onoda felt his knees give way. The strength that had sustained him, the iron will, the conviction that Japan was winning, the belief that the Imperial fleet was on its way evaporated. He slumped onto the ground. He gripped his rifle until his knuckles turned white. "Why?" Onoda howled. It was a sound of pure agony. "Why did you not come sooner?" "We didn't know," Taniguchi said softly. "We thought you were dead." Onoda looked at the dark sky. Images flashed through his mind. Shimada bleeding on the beach. Kozuka burning in the rice paddy. Akatsu running away. "They died for nothing," Onoda wept. "Kozuka died for nothing. I wasted my life for a lie." He slammed the butt of his rifle into the dirt. He screamed at the moon, a primal scream of grief and rage that echoed off the mountains. The war was over, and he was the last casualty. The surrender. The next morning, March 10th, 1974, Onoda walked down the mountain. He was no longer a guerrilla. He was a prisoner of peace. He walked to the Philippine Air Force radar base at the edge of the jungle. A crowd had gathered. Reporters, soldiers, villagers, the people he had terrorized for 30 years. Onoda wore his uniform. It was clean. He had shaved his beard. President Ferdinand Marcos of the Philippines stood waiting. Onoda approached the president. He unbuckled his sword belt. He held the samurai sword with both hands and bowed. "I surrender my sword," Onoda said. "I am sorry for the trouble I have caused." He handed the blade to Marcos. The crowd held its breath. Onoda had killed 30 people on the island. He had wounded hundreds. By rights, he should be put on trial. He should be executed. But Marcos looked at the old soldier. He saw the tragedy in his eyes. He saw a man who was a victim of his own loyalty. Marcos took the sword, and then he handed it back. "You were a soldier following orders," Marcos said. "I pardon you for all acts committed during the war." Onoda took the sword. He didn't feel relief. He felt empty. He turned to look at the jungle one last time. The green wall that had been his home, his fortress, and his hell. "Goodbye, Lubang," he whispered. The alien world. Tokyo, March 12, 1974. The plane landed at Haneda Airport. A crowd of 5,000 people was waiting. Flags waved. Banners read, "Welcome home, hero." Onoda walked down the stairs. The flashbulbs blinded him. The noise was deafening. He looked at the city. It was unrecognizable. Where were the wooden houses? Where was the smoke? Tokyo was a neon jungle of steel and glass. There were cars everywhere. People were wearing strange, colorful clothes. He was taken to a hospital for a checkup. The doctors were amazed. He was in perfect physical health. His vision was sharp. His muscles were lean. But his mind was adrift. He was interviewed by reporters. "What were you thinking about for 30 years?" they asked. "Doing my duty," Onoda said flatly. "What do you think of modern Japan?" Onoda looked at the television in his hospital room. He saw game shows. He saw commercials for soft drinks. He saw a generation of Japanese men who looked soft, who had forgotten the code of Bushido. "It is prosperous," Onoda said politely. But privately, he hated it. He felt like a stranger in his own country. He had fought to preserve the soul of Japan. But the Japan he returned to had sold its soul for radios and refrigerators. He was a relic, a museum piece. People looked at him with pity or treated him like a circus freak. "I am not a hero," Onoda told his brother one night, drinking sake. "I am a failure. I failed to die." Epilogue: The cowboy. He couldn't stay in Japan. It was too loud, too crowded, too shallow. So, in 1975, Onoda did the only thing that made sense. He went back to the wild. He moved to Brazil. He bought a ranch in the middle of nowhere. He raised cattle. He cleared the land with a machete, just like he had in Lubang. He married a Japanese woman who taught tea ceremony. They lived quietly, but every night he would sit on his porch and listen to the insects. He would close his eyes and he would be back there. He would smell the rain. He would feel the weight of the Arasaka in his hands. He would hear Kozuka breathing next to him in the dark. For the rest of the world, Hiro Onoda was the soldier who didn't know the war ended. But Onoda knew the truth. The war never really ends for the men who fight it. It just changes location. In 1996, he returned to Lubang for a visit. He went to the spot where Kozuka died. He knelt down and prayed. He laid flowers. A local woman approached him. She was the granddaughter of a farmer whose cow Onoda had stolen in 1950. "Do you hate me?" Onoda asked her. She looked at the old man. "We forgave you a long time ago," she said. "You were trapped in a time prison." Onoda nodded. He died in 2014 in a hospital in Tokyo at the age of 91. In his final moments, as the heart monitor beeped, his mind didn't go to the skyscrapers or the cattle ranch. It went to the ridge, to the sunlight filtering through the palm leaves, to the voice of Major Taniguchi saying, "You are forbidden to die." And finally, after 70 years, Hiro Onoda accepted the new order. Mission accomplished, Lieutenant. It is the end.